biggest joke is that you can't run from it even if you try. Because even in staying in the house, that's a risk. You risk not living. And every time you leave your house, you risk not coming home. If you're a man and you're a woman, you both want to have a very prestigious career. Not only because you want to see what you can do and how you can contribute in a meaningful way in this world, but because that's the only option it seems that you have because of the economic conditions and the cost of living in Western world. What are the chances of you homeschooling your children? You can create a great life for yourself, materialistically, even though your why is rooted in fear, but you may not feel it. You don't feel like you have a great life. You have habits that just make us feel better and improve our mood, or habits that help us live better to improve our lives. In a business, I don't care about you as a full person. I only care about what I can get from you in a way that supports my agenda. And I've been conditioned to think and behave in this way throughout my life. That seeps into my relationships in the business. The moment you no longer can contribute in the way that the business is interested in is the moment you become obsolete. You being a nice person and all of those things don't really matter because the business doesn't see you as a person. The business sees you as a tool, a piece of technology, something that can be manipulated to be used in a way that benefits the business for as long as it benefits the business. And whenever it stops benefiting the business stops using it. And business is always personal. You want to be considered something serious? Okay. Be clean cut. Be clean cut, be formal, dress casually, and you'll pretty much be welcomed with open arms in every environment. Is that the message you want to send?
Where should a man start with conducting or constructing their appearance when it comes to fashion?
With their physical bodies. How your body is structured. You have a even build, meaning your upper body and your lower body are proportionate to one another. Do you not have an even build? Sometimes the lower body on a man is larger than the upper body. You see men with really big legs, big calves, but really small arms, pinched shoulders almost. Yeah. So I would start with your physical body. What is the composition of your body naturally? Do you have an interest in changing that? And to what extent? You're not going to necessarily change your natural composition, but you can influence it a bit. What is the goal there? And then move forward from that based on whatever message you want to send to the world. Because clothes don't make you look good. Your body makes the clothes look good. That's why when you're modeling, they don't want you to have much of a body because your body becomes distracting. So then it becomes more about your body than it becomes about the clothes. So in high fashion, they want you to be as slim as possible because you are really supposed to be a walking hanger. When you put the clothes on a hanger, you don't think about the hanger, you think about the clothes. So if you have a body, that's what's gonna make the clothes look good or badly. And they don't want that. They just want to see the clothes. But of course they have to have the clothes on a person. So the smaller the person is, the better. But your body is gonna make the experience. Your body is gonna determine whether or not they look at the clothes. Well, essentially your body's gonna determine how the clothes look on you. And that is, do you get lost in the clothes? Do people just see the clothes? Or do they see you? And then from there, it's what's the message that you want to communicate? Oftentimes people dress up and they say, okay, this is my style. I'm expressing myself. But when you express yourself, you say something. what are you saying with this style? And that tends not to be thought about very much. It's just, I like it. Before you speak, you've spoken. So, not to say that you need to change it, but it's important to be aware of it. And that goes for everything. Your hair, having a beard, all of those things mean something. There came a point in society where having a beard was a thing that became celebrated. But there was a time in society where you didn't see beards very often. You seen a lot of men with shaved faces, and that was the norm, especially in the workplace. You didn't have men with long hair in the workplace. So if you seen a man with a beard, long hair, tattoos, it was pretty much an archetype for a certain type of lifestyle. Now those lines have been blurred a little bit more. But when you're thinking about how you want to express yourself to the world, it's important to think about that holistically. What body type do I have? Does that complement the look that I'm going for? If you have a bulky, athletic physique, and you saw something on runway that looked good to you, and it didn't necessarily look good for, well, it looked good on that person. It's not going to look the same on you because you don't have the same body type. Is that something that's going to look good on you? And what is it going to say when you put it on? Muscle shirts look good because they show that you have muscles. But what message does that communicate to society? Look at me. How does society feel about somebody that's saying, look at me? Is that the message you want to send? Or do you not care about that? You just like the shirt. But it will impact your experience. So there are people who understand that and take the path of least resistance by aligning themselves with the cultural perspective associated with a particular choice in fashion. You want to be considered someone serious? Okay. Be clean cut. Be clean cut, be formal. Dress casually. And you'll pretty much be welcomed with open arms in every environment. Otherwise, understand that there are certain implications that come with how you look. If you're in the hood and everybody's dressed baggy jeans and sagging their pants and long big t-shirts and Jordans, and you walk through in a suit, a Tom Ford suit, you're going to be sending a different message. Or if you're in an office space and everybody has on Tom Ford suits and you walk in with baggy jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt, you're going to be sending a different message. Is that the message you want to send?
What do you think is kind of like such a standard for men not to care about their fashion? Like so few men understand the value of it.
Because traditionally a man's value came from work that he could do with his hands. So typically men dressed functionally or for functional purposes. You don't move in a suit the same way you move in jeans and a t-shirt. And if my value comes from movement, then I want to be comfortable. I want to be in something where I can move. And so that is the concept, or the traditional concept attached to being a man, was being a provider, being a protector. You think of somebody that's a provider and a protector traditionally. They may not have been wearing suits. If you're in an office space, yeah. In a fragile Western society where you can cause change through conversation, and that's it. Sitting behind a desk and writing and reading, that's a different environment. But if you're a farmer, you're not a farmer with a suit on. And that's not pretty work. And men were associated with that type of work more than they were associated with being in office spaces. The closer men got to offices, the more they cared about their appearance. The longer men stay in offices, the more they care about their appearance. So now you have men caring more and more about their appearance because they're further and further away from farming. So the standard of beauty changes.
How do you take those facts, knowing what society is right now, and in the world of business, apply that?
Business is always personal. You like to hear them, oh, this is not personal, this is not personal. Business is always personal. Always. And the element that makes it personal is time. You don't get your time back that you spend doing business. And that time that you spend doing business is time that you take from your life. It's all one thing. We try to separate it, but that doesn't really make sense. It's different components of one thing, but it's one thing nonetheless. Right? So the laws of nature are the laws of nature everywhere. Right? Nature doesn't care that you made a building and put a name on the front of it. And you have a paper with this, where you registered this building as, or this imaginary entity known as a business. Nature doesn't care about that. The law of attraction still applies. The law of compensation still applies. Karma is still a thing. Harmony is still important. Environment is still important. Language is still important. All those things don't go away because you decided you wanted to start a business. Life is still life. And the people who understand that tend to be the ones that are most successful. Oftentimes we live life a certain way and then we go into a business office or a business environment and behave as if we're somehow different from the person we were when we were living life. You're the same person you were outside of that building, inside of that building. You just rob yourself of the experience of your whole self, depending on where you are. So you reject a portion of yourself when you're in that building, and you reject a portion of yourself when you're outside of it. When really you're just one person. And the people who understand that seem to be the people who find this concept of balance in their lives. It's really not balance. It's just understanding that everything is everything. It's all integrated. Nothing exists in isolation.
Sometimes when you're on the work floor, I don't know if it's like a black thing, but you kind of, you know where I'm going with this?
No, we're good.
I feel at least sometimes that I have to like switch up my character to fit in, because
To fit in with.
in the business world, in the office space,
Of course.
I can use certain lingo.
Mm-hmm.
I have to talk lighter,
Mm-hmm.
not with as much impunity, even though it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be aggressive, but I talk softer.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of times, I do these things when I did them outside the office. I was like, yeah, but fuck it, I'm just being me.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, that doesn't feel right when I do it at work.
Does it not feel right, or do you feel conflicted?
I feel conflicted because there's a company culture,
Right.
which where if I don't fit in there, I might not be in the company for that much longer.
Right.
So it's, even if I feel like doing it,
Mm-hmm.
my survival brain is like, yeah, but we need this job.
Exactly. But it's not the how you. It's not how you're speaking. That's the issue. It's the confliction that's the issue. It's understanding that this is not an environment that was built for you. The whole you. Oftentimes people separate business from people so they can just get the portion of the person that they want and leave the rest. A business environment is one that's often designed to treat people like machines. Right? If you go on your computer right now, you can just focus on the aspect of the operation capability of your computer that you want to focus on. And you don't have to do anything with the rest. For example, this phone has a lot of capability, but I just text, call, and take pictures and videos. The rest of it I don't really use. Bunch of apps that come on my phone naturally, I don't really use them. And because we get accustomed to utilizing things in that way, that's how we approach each other. So all that it means to have a business is to be able to express the aspects of a person or extract the capabilities of a person. That's not the right way. Use the capabilities of a person, and only those capabilities in a certain way for a certain amount of time for a very specific desired result. But because people are not machines, it's hard to do that without the environment becoming political. You try to get around politics with bureaucracy, steps, that are known for people to take so that you can kind of do without all of the other things, which typically just leads to more politics and more people feeling like they are not accepted for being their full selves. But that's not what business is for. It's not designed for you to be your full self. I think it affects people differently. Some people enjoy it, or at least they think they do. Some people don't. But they don't really know how to get out of it because society conditions you for this way of being. You go to kindergarten at 4 or 5 years old, and from 4 to 5 years old to 22 years old, you're being conditioned to live in this way. So by the time you make it to the workforce, a lot of it feels natural.
Can you give some examples of things that they're doing to condition you?
From a very early age, everything is time-stamped. You wake up at this time, you have to be to school at this time, you have recess at this time, a lunch break. You come back at this time, lunch break's over, clock back in, and school is over at this time. Then you go home and you do homework. Right? Or overtime, however you want to say it. Right? After your homework, you can do whatever else you want. But it's important to know that you got to be back at school or the office later in life at a certain time. So if you're doing that from 5 years old, by the time you're 25 years old, that's normal. Doesn't seem weird. Something internally may tell you this doesn't align with me. And that intuition is what creates conflict. And part of the reason it creates conflict is because you've been conditioned to do this your whole life. So it feels weird, but you don't know any other way. So either way, you feel wrong. You feel wrong for not behaving this way because this is the only way you know. And then you feel a way for actually behaving that way because intuitively you know that this is not aligned with your spirit. So that's one way that it affects or could affect people. Another way is how we interact with each other. In a business, I don't care about you as a full person. I only care about what I can get from you in a way that supports my agenda. And I've been conditioned to think and behave in this way throughout my life. That seeps into my relationships. In a business, the moment you no longer can contribute in the way that the business is interested in is the moment you become obsolete. You being a nice person and all of those things don't really matter. Because the business doesn't see you as a person. The business sees you as a tool. A piece of technology, something that can be manipulated to be used in a way that benefits the business for as long as it benefits the business. And whenever it stops benefiting the business stops using it. You're not seen as a person. You're seen as a means to an end. And oftentimes, because we've been conditioned to think this way, that's also how we treat people in our lives. We don't just keep that in a workspace. We apply it to everything and everyone around us. How do you break out of the mindset that this is the only way that I know how to live life?
Yeah.
By trying different things.
Can you give an example?
If you live in a hood, if you live in the Bronx, if you live on 161 and Trinity Avenue, if you live in Forest Projects, if you live in Soundview Projects, if you live in Mount Haven, if you live in Mitchell's, if you live in Roosevelt, if you live in Edenwald, if you live in a hood, or if you live in Southside Chicago, if you live in Compton, if you live under rough circumstances where there's a lot of poverty amongst minorities, go to an environment where there isn't a lot of poverty, but there's still minorities. Go to a town that's predominantly minorities, but there isn't a lot of poverty, and see how they behave. Befriend someone, see how they think. See what their habits are and how they differ from yours. See what their philosophies are and how they differ from yours. See how those philosophies impact those people's lives and how your philosophies have impacted yours. See what they do. Chances are the things that they do every day are the things that you do every now and again. If you got a job and you had to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning, you probably get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you had a job that you had to get there at 9 o'clock in the morning, you probably get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. They get up at 5 o'clock in the morning all the time, even on the weekends. And they don't even go to work on Saturday and Sunday. How does that one thing impact their lives differently? Habits are contagious. That's how. One bad habit spills over into the next one. You have the bad habit of waking up late. What does that tend to lead to? I woke up late today, man, I'm rushing to work. Right? Okay, cool. That means everything in that day is delayed. I woke up late. Probably not going to eat breakfast because I woke up late. Because I didn't eat breakfast, I'm probably irritable. Because I'm irritable, I probably didn't make that extra phone call because I just didn't want to be bothered. Because I didn't make that extra phone call because I just didn't want to be bothered. My performance is slacking. Because my performance is slacking, I want to feel better about myself. I want to feel better about the moment. I go and get a cheesecake. When I got a cheesecake, I don't feel so good from the cheesecake. I skip the gym. It's a whole pattern of things that happen. And if you're not careful, you can do that every day until that's just the norm. Or we know he's going to be late. We know he's gonna come in with an attitude. We know he's hangry. We got something for him. We know he ain't gonna make that extra call. He's not the kind of person to go the extra mile. We know he's not gonna eat right. He's an emotional eater. Those things become habits because habits are contagious. And we decide which habits we want to implement. Do we want to implement positive ones that actually serve our lives? Or do we want to implement negative ones that only serve our feelings at that moment? But they don't really help us achieve the things that we want to achieve in our lives. So do we have the habits that just make us feel better and improve our mood? Or habits that help us live better to improve our lives? And oftentimes in making that assessment, you can understand why your reality looks the way that it does. Excuse me. And oftentimes it's based on what you believe, what your philosophies are. So it's important to challenge that philosophy. The easiest way to do that is to get into a different environment. Doesn't mean it's gonna change. But also, it's how comfortable are you? Some people are comfortable where they are. They go somewhere else, I don't really like it, they can't wait to get home. And typically that's the way it is in the beginning, especially if it's different. Now you have to decide, is it a positive thing or a negative thing? Sometimes you get to environments and it's actually not the environment you should be in. It's not so positive. You can't wait to get back home. That's a good thing. Some would say. I would say, go to another environment. Don't come back home. Right? Go to another environment that's positive. That can challenge you in a positive way. Because oftentimes we don't really understand what trying is. You do one thing your whole life, you feel justified in doing that until you don't. You attempt to do something else. It doesn't necessarily go the way that you want it to go. And you say, oh, well, I tried. And you come back home. That's not trying. You attempted to try. Trying is a continuous process. If this doesn't work, you do it this way. You do it multiple ways. That's trying. Yeah. You have to be interested in that. You have to be interested in challenging your perspective. And okay with being uncomfortable, with being bothered. Being able to be bothered and being able to process information in the moment that is given, or your feelings when you feel them. Sometimes someone can ask you a triggering question and you're bothered by it, but you don't know why you're bothered by it. You end up snapping on this person, but they're just having a conversation with you. And that can take away from the opportunity that you just had to challenge your perspective and potentially see things differently. But you robbed yourself of the experience by snapping on this person, really for no reason. Or at least one you don't understand. And typically it has nothing to do with that person. Probably something that has something to do with someone else, or another experience that you had that you actually didn't address, that you probably should have. I saw that a lot growing up. Kids just snapping on people and adults. And it was interesting to see the adult let it happen sometimes. Sometimes they were adults that were interested in being respected and etc. Actually, a lot of times they were adults that were interested in being respected. But sometimes they were adults that understood that this doesn't have anything to do with me, and it was interesting to see the difference in how they handled the situation. Don't ruin the opportunity. And if you do ruin the opportunity, have enough tenacity to keep trying. So that the next opportunity you have, you can see it for what it is and take advantage of it.
I finally started watching The Last Dance. And it talked a lot about, in the first 2 episodes, about like the background stories of like Michael and Scotty. And it's funny to see like it always like dates back to like childhood. For instance, like Michael had like very competitive brother, and he's trying to get like his father's recognition. The same actually, if you look at like the Arnold Schwarzenegger like, documentary, it's the same thing. He had a brother too who was like very competitive with like competing for their parents' approval. And so, what do you think of like a wife starting at such a young age and what is rooted in?
I think when you're younger, oftentimes you don't have a lot of context for life. You may understand your life a bit, but life at large, you don't have a lot of context for. So you go based on your experience, and although your feelings are your feelings, and they may be valid based on your current understanding, you don't have much of an understanding as a child. So not having that context for life could make it seem as if you need to compete with your siblings for your parents' attention, when in actuality they love you both the same, or they love you all the same. But if you have a sibling that is doing well at something and your parent is offering words of affirmation because that sibling is doing well, it's easy to associate those words of affirmation with significance. Right? And the more significant a person seems to be in a child's mind, perhaps that person is more lovable because they're more significant. So I need to match that significance if I care to receive the same amount of love. And oftentimes, as parents also don't have enough context in regard to what it means to be a parent, to reassure the child that may not have been performing in a way that their sibling is performing, that they're not loved any less or any more.
You think it can be damaging at times?
I think without the explanation and action that follows it up, meaning action that reinforces the explanation and makes it real, it can be damaging. If you're a parent and you have 2 children, and let's say one is 12 and one is 10, and the 12-year-old is performing really well in school, but the 10-year-old is performing really well in sports. How do you compliment both of them and assure both of them that they're just as valuable as the other to you? Because you care about them more than you care about sports or school. So pouring into them directly and not using a love language as a metaphor for how you feel about them. Doing all of the things that you can do, using all love languages, using also your energy. You can say something, but if the father of the 12-year-old and the 10-year-old says the same exact thing to both of them, but the energy is different based on which one he's speaking to, children are going to pick up on that as well. So it's not just the physical activity or the verbal activity, it's also the nonverbal. And I mean that on an energetic level, because there's a physical nonverbal as well. So I don't mean only the physical nonverbal, I mean energetically. If the father is home with the 12-year-old and the energy is kind of, but as soon as the 10-year-old comes home, the energy changes. The 12-year-old is going to pick up on that. The 12-year-old is going to pick up on, okay, the energy got lighter when the 10-year-old came home. It wasn't so light when the 12-year-old was there alone. Those are things that are important too, for parents to mind their energy and make sure that the child understands that they're loved. And that way, you can reinforce your child having a positive why, and not a why that's rooted in competition because they feel like they are somehow put in position where they have to constantly prove themselves or they're not lovable.
What do you think, like, can a why be that strong that it can make you from because I feel like competitiveness is almost like a DNA trait, like it's just something innate in you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that sort of like nature versus nurture, that you can become very competitive, or that's like already in you?
I definitely think you can become competitive. And yes, some people are naturally competitive, but that doesn't mean that their why has to be rooted in something negative. You can have a positive why and be competitive. For example, I want to offer the most value to the world than anyone else because I care that much. So you may be competing with someone else who feels like that, but they may not, and they may not have, that why for them may not be rooted in positivity. For you, you can say, I want to contribute as much as more than anyone else in the world, provide more value than anyone else in the world, because I care so much. To the other person, it can be, I want to provide as much value, provide more value to people than anyone else in the world, because I know what it's like to not be considered valuable. And I don't ever want anybody else to have that feeling. One is, I want you to I want to contribute to people because I just think that they're amazing. I want them to see that. I want them to see that they can have whatever it is that they put their mind to and they believe. The other one is, now I want you to be the best person that you can be because the world is trying to tear you down. And I don't think you should let them do that. So, it's not, you can both be competitive, but one is competing for a completely different reason, and one that's more positive.
Then why do you think so many people have like great success stories got their why rooted in fear?
Because fear is a great motivator. A lot of people are very successful in life and their motivation is fear because fear is a great motivator. And fear is a great motivator because your mind is designed to keep you alive. But it doesn't, subconsciously your mind is designed to keep you alive. Consciously, your mind is designed for you to live out loud, to thrive. So if 95%, which is your subconscious mind controls 95% of your actions. If that part is looking for everything that's wrong and telling you to run from that thing, that's really, really strong compared to this 5% that's trying to disprove that and say, no, you can do things differently. Typically, the 5% won't even tell you that you can do things differently. Because the 95% is so strong, the 5% now has to figure out a way to make that real. Right? To logically justify that. Or once you find yourself in a position, because your subconscious actually made it real, not your conscious, now you have to exist in that space and figure out what you're gonna do there. Your subconscious mind is like, it's always negative, and you find yourself in negative situations. To some extent, your conscious mind is the mind that's controlling how you interact with people or situations in that negative space. Now, depending on what happens in that negative space, or while you're having that experience that you perceive to be negative, your subconscious mind takes over. And that's when it's fight, flight, or freeze. That's typically your subconscious mind that's giving you an indication to do that. And that happens naturally. What doesn't happen naturally for most is positive thought. And that's why it's important to stand guard at the gate of your mind and continuously feed your mind positive things. Continuously. Because that one negative thing that you put into your brain or into your mind grows. It starts attracting other negative things. And it becomes harder to maintain this sense of positivity. So definitely you can create a great life for yourself materialistically. Even though your why is rooted in fear. But you may not feel it. You don't feel like you have a great life. Because your why is rooted in fear. And on the flip side, you can have a life that may not be perceived as such a great life materialistically. But because your why is rooted in positive, life and how you experience your life is joyful. You feel it. You feel the great things that you have in your life. Now, if you create an amazing life materialistically and you have a positive why, then that's a whole nother level of euphoria.
Because as a child, you cannot really. It's hard to gauge that. Your conscious and your subconscious.
Mm-hmm. It's not really for a child to gauge that. Because depending on how old you are, indeed, it is hard to gauge it. It may feel nearly impossible to gauge it. That's why it's important to be raised in a fruitful environment. By wise people. That's why they say the elderly is supposed to raise children. And if you speak to a lot of parents, they'll tell you, who have the blessing of being grandparents, they'll tell you, in most instances in my life, they've told me, rather, that they were way better grandparents than they were parents. It's because they have more experience. They have more of an understanding and they have more patience. So you will hear a lot of grandparents, well, you'll hear a lot of parents speak to their parent, who are now grandparents, and say things like, "You would have never let me get away with that as a child." And they say, "Yeah, you're right. But I didn't have the understanding that I have now, back then." That's the patience that a child needs. The understanding, the wisdom, the wise counsel that a child needs. So that when their subconscious mind is being developed, those seeds can be planted as opposed to fear. Right? The seeds of abundance can be planted to the mind of those children instead of the seed of lack.
Do you think school systems do a good job at that?
Absolutely not. School systems absolutely do not do a good job at instilling the seed of abundance in the subconscious minds of children.
Can you elaborate?
Absolutely, it's rooted in fear. Everything is about a grade and you behaving the way that this person that has the position of authority says you should behave. Even if it doesn't feel right or make sense to you. Even if it doesn't coincide with your genetic makeup. Young boys shouldn't be sitting in a room for hours on end. Young boys should be outside running around. That's how you're designed. But from a very early age, you're expected to have an extremely high level of discipline at a time when you should be enjoying freedom, not discipline.
Why do you think that we as a society still hold on to such a conservative school system?
I think we as a society continue to hold on to a conservative school system at scale because some people don't. Some people homeschool their children, and that's becoming more and more of a preferred practice. Society supports a conservative school system, even though it doesn't do a great job at planting the seed of abundance in the subconscious mind of children, because one, it makes sense from just a practical standpoint, short-term practical standpoint, not long-term. And because that's the only system that society knows currently. Yes, some time ago, wasn't really that long ago, but a few generations now, things were different. But the lifestyle of most people in society today does not support the way things used to be. If you're a man and you're a woman, you both want to have a very prestigious career, not only because you want to see what you can do and how you can contribute in a meaningful way in this world, but because that's the only option it seems that you have because of the economic conditions and the cost of living in Western world. What are the chances of you homeschooling your children? So that puts the pressure on parents to say the best option is to make more money so that we can send our children to private school where they can receive a better education, which provides less time for the parent to actually be with the child because they're trying to make more money. And the parents have not been conditioned to make more money because they come from the same school system, which doesn't really teach them how to make more money. It teaches them how to be the best employee possible. The best employee possible doesn't necessarily teach you how to make more money because in order to make them, because there's a glass ceiling here. Yes, being a great employee can help you make more money, but at some point, there's no more money for you to make. If you want to make the most money, then you want to embark onto a path of entrepreneurship. They don't teach you how to be an entrepreneur in school. School teaches you how to work for entrepreneurs. At least on the surface. If we take the conservative school system for face value, for the children who can see beyond that and understand that perhaps school is a double entendre, then they can see that the main objective in school is for you to learn how to learn, which is the number one skill set of all. If a school system doesn't teach you how to be an employee, teach you how to be an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurship is what's needed in order to make the most money so that you can send your child to a better school or even possibly homeschool your child, then what are your options? Which is why a lot of people feel stuck. Because they feel like there's a gap in their education. And the unknown is prominent sources of fear. Unknown, not knowing, that paralyzes people. And you have a group of people who don't have to have all the answers, but because they know how to learn, they go figure it out. And those are typically the entrepreneurs. Those are typically the people that you say, or that society would say, are born entrepreneurs. Now, can you become an entrepreneur? Yes, you don't have to be born an entrepreneur. You just have to understand your capacity for risk. So throughout your life, you have to have some examples, which we all have, of when we've taken risks, even major risks. And when we haven't taken major risks but still experienced extreme stress, to realize that either way you have the same experience, at least conceptually. So why not go for your potential? Why not take a chance at entrepreneurship? Because conceptually speaking, you're going to have the same experience anyway. You're going to have a lot of ups and downs. You're going to experience extreme stress. Some things are risky, and you're going to be interested in taking that risk so you can remind yourself that you're alive. Some things you're not necessarily going to be so interested in risking because you want to stay alive. But that's life, if you care to have one. The biggest joke is that you can't run from it even if you try. Because even in staying in the house, that's a risk. You risk not living. And every time you leave your house, you risk not coming home, regardless to what you do. So why not leave your house with the intention of making the greatest contribution that you possibly can make? Because at least that way, you can say you left it all on the table.